Okay, in this video we are going to look at quantifying the counterparty credit exposure, and as you know this would be an audio class. So we'll define and understand credit exposure from various security positions using different methods which would range from simple method to complex methods such as Monte Carlo simulation. Now this Monte Carlo simulation is one simulation most often seen in the entire financial risk management world, so you should be aware about this one. In case you want to go back, you can see some of the videos on Monte Carlo simulations that I have made earlier. The whole idea here is to find out the potential future exposure for asset classes and how netting can help us to mitigate expected exposure, and what is the role of correlation in determining expected exposure. So techniques that are used to quantify credit exposure are like add-on, semi-analytic methods, and Monte Carlo simulations. Potential future exposure is defined as maximum expected credit risk exposed for a specific period of time at a pre-specified level of confidence. PFE is a measure of counterparty and credit exposure. Thus, maximum credit party exposure indicated by a PFE analysis is the upper bound of the confidence interval for future credit risk. The ability to quantify counterparty credit exposure is impacted by time to maturity. There is more uncertainty related to market variable further into the future. The first method here is add-on, which is an approach for quantifying credit exposure in the simplest method that adds a component for future uncertainty of PFE to the current exposure by its mark-to-market value. The add-on component is determined by time horizon, volatility of underlying asset, and risk of the underlying transaction. Add-on grids are often used to provide quick estimates of add-on exposure as percent of notional value for interest rate swap. The potential future exposure impact can quickly be identified for a new trade by looking at grids such as the ones that compare currency and maturity. So longer time horizon have greater uncertainty, require higher add-on. Forward and commodity markets that are more volatile also require higher add-ons. So the add-ons could be like dependent on time and the currency and different effects. So more subtle effects are often overlooked to keep these calculations quick and easy. Example of this overlook effects including collateral, transaction specifics related to cash flows, and mark to market that vary from zeros. Thus two different interest rate swaps can use the same add-on component even if they have different PFE profiles due to payer versus receiver swaps, payment frequency, or difference floating. So add-on is very simple. You just add on those things, and you just add a component for future uncertainty, and that's it. And you use a predefined measure defined in a table and do that. And the semi-analytical method, now this becomes a little complex, and the next step. Semi-analytical method for quantifying credit exposure are based on simple exposure, risk factors, the risk factor distribution, and risk metric for risk factor distribution. Shortcomings are like simplified assumptions which are made with respect to identifying risk factors, and this does complicate assumptions like momentum and mean reversion are not easily dealt with in methodology. Now when I talk about momentum and mean reversion, these are few terms that that just jumps here in these topics and are linked to the past. So momentum means drift, momentum means slope, momentum means the direction in which the security is going, and mean reversion is a property where we attach weight and we make the things revert to the mean, like interest rate in short term may behave in a geometric Brownian motion way, but in long term they would be mean reverting. So depending on the time frames we use different kind of models. So these are not captured in the semi-analytical methods, and they are not dealt with. Risk exposure calculation over time are made independently, and path dependent aspects cannot be captured. Typically one single risk measure like potential future exposure determined rather than full distribution. Full distribution means all paths. So as you must be knowing, in Monte Carlo simulation we generate all those paths, and then we find out which paths are landing at which places. So there is a single measure and not all those paths. Netting effect and collateral are often ignored. And finally, we have the Monte Carlo simulation that are used to deal with complex factors that are often ignored with add-on and semi-analytical method. Monte Carlo simulation can model numerous market variable correlation, transaction specifics, path dependency, netting, and collateral effect. So next step here would be to understand what are Monte Carlo simulation. Although we will limit ourselves to understand them in the perspective of the current reading, but we can jump on to older parts if required. So in the Monte Carlo technique for quantifying exposure, we have to look at the choice of risk, which is hotspot on the exposure profile. Credit exposures are estimated by implementing Monte Carlo simulation, where we have factor choice, scenario generation, revaluation, aggregation, post-processing, and extraction of statistic. So let's understand these terms one by one. The step one is factor choice. So first step involves determining the risk factor that influences the credit exposure. The factors are then used to create the model and the potential for future exposure. Example of risk factors that are typically included are spot rates, spot foreign exchange rates, implied volatility. A factor must be selected to create a model with the ability to generate PFE and to match current market variables including yield curves, FX spot rates, and commodity prices. Simulate discrete scenario risk factors in Monte Carlo framework. Now the second part is scenario generation. Not explicitly mentioned here, but you can take this as step as a very the very same of path generation. A time grid is chosen to simulate scenarios of risk factor at various point in time. The grid typically has a range of 50 to 100 simulation time period in order to effectively represent the details of PFE. Then we have revaluation. Individual positions are evaluated for each time period in the future. For example, the value of interest rate position are priced based on risk factor, interest rates based on reasonable yield curve for time period evaluated. This step further requires valuation model to efficiently manage number of simulated calculation required. For example, a model of 10,000 simulation involving 200 counterparties with 50 average trades and 100 simulation step would require 10 billion calculation. So that's a kind of revaluation where you revalue each time period in the future. The value of interest rate position has got various risks. You have to decide what distributions you are going to use and how much calculation you are going to do. Then the next is aggregation, which is the step 4. So revaluation generates a matrix of values given in each scenario at a point in time on the time grid. These values are then aggregated to form a netting set with appropriate condition for all counterparties evaluated. For example, the exposure for possible netting is represented as a max function of mark-to-market values, and post-processing aggregation steps provided netting exposure based on scenario and the time grid generated. If there is additional effects such as collateral, each exposure path required post-processing to determine total exposure after analyzing collateral. Extraction of statistic. In the final step, risk metrics are extracted to meet risk management, pricing, or regulatory requirement. Something that came into between, and that's a post-processing and aggregation. The whole idea here is that suppose you find a path where you reach somewhere where you have to collateralize or where you have to mark to market some orders. Then in the Monte Carlo simulation, when your path reach that range or that region, then you have to make sure that your simulation does the required thing for all of that path. And finally, when all of these things are done, then you do the extraction of scenario. So as shown in step 3, the number of calculation using the Monte Carlo simulation technique is quite large. Therefore, discrete time points are used to calculate exposure to reduce number of required calculation. Essentially, the exposure profile incorporate appropriate risk hotspot or key areas of risk. Role of risk is defined as the risk of missing jump in exposure caused by discontinuous profile as a result of various factors. So missing jumps in exposure, I'll talk about this word jump. It's very important when we study the whole path generation and simulation. So in the role of risk, the risk of missing jumps in exposure caused by discontinuous profile that result from variety of factors such as maturity dates, option exercise, cash flows, and amortization. Non-time horizon time grids could be used to control role of risk. However, this may cause potential future exposure to significantly change daily due to exposure jumps for short period of time. A more efficient approach is to incorporate critical points into the time grid where exposure changes based on risk factors. So that was how we are going to do these kind of things in a Monte Carlo simulation. Let's now move to the security exposure profile. So typical exposure profile for security types include loans, bonds, repos, swaps, FX options, and credit derivatives. So example of PFE used to allocate the exposure profile for various security types that result from different effects, and these different effects could be maturity, option exercise, payment frequencies, default risk, roll-off risk, etc. A PFE of bond, loans, and repos are approximately equal to the notional value. The additional exposure of a 4-year bond would be like the result of interest rate risk, and the bond typically pays a fixed interest rate, and when the interest rate declines, the prices of bond would come down. So that would be an effect. So loan typically have various variable interest rate, and exposure over time may decrease as a result of prepayment. So when a loan and a bond are compared, you need to make sure that they have got different potential exposure. In one case your prices can come down, but in other case interest rate will not affect on the loan because it's a floating type, and your loan could be paid back, whereas your bond portfolio that you have will never be paid back. So if the loan is paid back, your potential exposure falls off, and there is like a constant probability that the loan is paid off over a period of time. So both of these things should be modeled, and the profile of whereas the profile of swaps are characterized by peak elements. The peak shape are resultant from balancing the future uncertainties and the roll-off risk of swap payment. So for an interest rate swap, the exposure rises and then comes down, and this is quite interesting. This has been an interesting thing that you have to understand that in some securities the exposure would go up and down. So if somebody wants to cancel an agreement, he will not do it today, and he'll not do it at the end. So he'll do it at some time in between, and that's what happened in interest rate swap. So the high volatility of because when you start with he knows what the instrument is, and when he end with the exposure is already less. So the middle time is where it creates trouble, and this has been a question all the time in the exam. The high volatility of FX rates, long maturity, large final payment of notional value result in monetarily increasing exposure of foreign Indian products. And in some exposure associated with interest, however, the majority of exposure result from uncertainty regarding the final notional value payment associated with FX rate. So if we see that there is a swap, and you have the notional exchange at the end, then your potential would rises. So the total currency swap would behave in a very different way. So the exact shape of graph can change when option is near in or out of the money. However, the increase in time is similar for our option due to the option can be deep in the money. So an option PFE would just increase monotonically, nearly monotonically. The effect of wrong way risk leads to considerable counterparty risk for credit derivatives, and this is another again very interesting risk. The exposure for long protection of credit default swap at different confidence interval is seen like its bulges up and then remains constant. So an increase in exposure in early years as a result of CDS premium widening. The maximum exposure for CDS occur at a credit event when the notional values it pays less. The 55% of the final exposure is for example in result of a 45% recovery rate. So their exposure could be quantized in terms of how much you can get if they would default. So it would never be more than that. So payment frequencies, exercise dates all affect exposure profile at profile of securities, and the impact of payment frequencies, interest rate swaps. We can look at the potential future exposure assuming semi-annual fixed payment that are made and floating quarterly payment that are received. So if both of them are mismatched, your exposure would be kind of moving up, because on one part you pay things in a semi-annual when, or you pay in quarterly, whereas you receive it semi-annually, so the exposure would bulge up and down. So that's how it would work. Exercise date result in more complex exposure profile for interest rate swap and forward swap with an expiration of 1 year. The swaption in the example is the swap settled on the expiration date. The payment frequency also differ for swap when compared to a forward swap. Notice that the exposure is greater for swaption prior to 1 year exercise date. Conversely, this relation reverses for exercise point, and exposure for forward swap is greater than the exposure of swaption. So swaps and swaption. So in swaption you have the option, but in swap you will know that a swap will always occur. So in the starting, the swaption has got more exposure, which nearly continues until the between, and at the end the forward swap has got more exposure. So the greater exposure is due to the fact that forward swap has positive value, whereas and the swaption is not exercised. So that's why the thing occurs, because swaption and swaps both have different exercise behavior. Now we move to the next topic, that's risk neutral versus real probability measure. A risk neutral parameter is often assumed in an arbitrage pricing model where hedging is used. Conversely, when exposure are calculated for risk management purposes, the parameters are not risk neutral but based on real historical data and common sense. Parameters used for drift and volatilities are market driven, that is risk neutral, and may not always reflect historical or even expected behavior. The length of the data used for parametric estimation has important implications. The shorter the data sample window results in poor statistic, whereas the longer data set will give more weight to older and less relevant data. So I have to be careful on that. So when the volatilities of market suddenly and dramatically increases, the model uses a long data sample for parameter, and it will gradually reflect an increase in data sample moving forward in time. The implied volatility will reflect the market uncertainty immediately. However, we have to be cautioned that that it should be used when applying implied volatility parameter in exposure and model. So in all these kind of scenarios, we have to take care of counterparty risk, interest rate diff, long-term periods, and their important impacts. So if you consider a PFE for cross-currency swaps with the same maturity, where one of the swaps pay high interest and other swaps receive a highest interest rate payment, a swap paying the higher interest has greater exposure than the reverse swap due to the fact that it has significantly gain on the notional value at the maturity of the swap. In addition, over the long term, interest rate drift dominates the implied volatility model. This causes the PFE for swap receiving the higher interest rate to remain flat. So we see that based on the pricing models that we are going to take, we have to decide a model that we'll choose on. Now we move to modeling credit exposure, and I did talk about many models that are used particularly for some securities, and here we start with a simple single factor model for equities, FX, commodities, credit spread, and interest rate. A single factor equity model is like geometric Brownian motion, and this model has a return distribution assumed to be normally distributed. The drift from liquidized the transaction can be either positive or negative. The drift could also be set to risk-free rate plus a risk premium. Volatility is either implied or calculated for historical data instead of individual securities. Indices are typically simulated and reduces the size of correlation matrix. So that's about the drift model. The typical single factor model, geometrical Brownian for foreign exchange, ensures that foreign exchange values are always positive. The drift parameter is based on forward rate or historical rate. If a risk manager is concerned with long-term horizon, the mean reversion parameter is excluded to prevent exponents from becoming too small. The long-term expectation level is theta, and he'll use that theta to make it reverting to the long-term mean. Jump diffusion model are sometimes used to reflect possibility of sovereign debt. So there are three things here that comes into play in modeling of these paths. First is the drift. In real life you also can call it the beta, because when you regress things with the old, you get a kind of slope where things are moving. But if you believe that in the long horizon this is something that's not going to go up, but this phenomena is something which is mean reverting, then you add a mean reverting factor into your model and you do your modeling in that particular aspect. Whereas if you think that the model has got jump diffusion or like sovereign default, emerging market, peg currency, there is a lot of probability that at a sudden instant there could be a jump on either side, that you use this jump diffusion model. If you remember, we use Poisson distribution for these jumps. So based on what you are going to use, you will get different result, and you have to be careful. So commodities have seasonality due to changes in assumption, demand and harvest. Commodity also exhibit mean reversion, reflecting the margin cost of production. A common model for using commodity is very different, which uses a mean reversion parameter, alpha, beta, risk neutral drift. Should not be used for characteristic of backwardation and contango, which are represented. So in the commodity you should use the mean reversion thing, and drift should not be used. So you have to select case by case on how you're going to model each of these phenomena while you move ahead and calculate things. Now when we move ahead, we move to credit spread, and counterparty and long variance is particular concern why credit spread should be included in credit model exposure. Credit spread can also exhibit jumps due to sudden expected change in credit quality. A common credit spread model that incorporates jumps and mean reversion would include all of these factors. So they would have jump, they would have mean reversion, they would have other parameters. So when the hazardous and intensity probability is lambda c, the mean reversion process should be theta n, and the Poisson distribution jump process is denoted. So I told you the jump process is distributed by Poisson, and the mean reversion is again added. Interest rate are the only asset class in the section that will follow negative values. Negative values are allowed to refract activity. A simple short-term interest rate model is used in a Brownian motion with a mean reverting factor. The mean reversing factor theta t time dependent, so that the model reflects the initial yield curve. Now when we have used or decided that we'll use a particular model, then the next thing that we need to take care is to tie our model with the yield curve. Now if you use a drift, or you use various path, but you know that in the future the forward implied rate as per today's market is this, and any rate beyond that rate today is giving an arbitrage opportunity. So you try to fit your model. So parameters are estimated by market or by historical meta. Mean reversion resulted lessening the standard deviation of discount factor and is negative when zero coupon bonds increasing. The standard deviation of zero coupon bond prices of different maturities is used to determine A and sigma parameters. Major shortcoming of interest rate model are the allowance of negative interest rate and restrictive yields that can miss some interest rate. An alternative model that practices simulate interest is multi-factor models, where principal factor yield curve movement, threesome common yield curve are modeled on parallel shift, teased and butterfly shift. So there are two things here. One thing is that when you model interest rate, you have to make sure you don't go into the negative interest rate category, because that's not going to happen. So all those paths going there should be used by a max function or a min function or whatever to just make it stop from going into negative region. And then the whole movement in the yield curve, whenever it happens, it should be a parallel or twist or butterfly. So you cannot just change one part and make it as like a simple Brownian motion. So these are all some of the challenges and things that you have to keep in mind. Now describe how netting is modeled. Netting agreements allow parties a net set of position, and one of the parties default, and that helps in calculating things. So this type of risk is effectively modeled in Monte Carlo simulation. The benefit of netting are realized when mark-to-market value have opposite sign of trades. Thus, netting calculation is done by individual level prior to calculating the total expected exposure. The time horizon netting factor is defined by expected exposure, and a weighted average E defines the expected exposure, and they have the thing here. So netting exposure for J with simulation can new exposure when trade has been added. So what are those netting factors? So given an EPE estimate or expected potential exposure estimate, the netting factor can be defined as EPE no netting versus EPE netting. This result is a netting factor of 100 factor when there is no netting benefit and 0% when maximum netting benefit are present. Suppose a 5-year interest rate pays a fixed interest rate and receives a floating interest rate. What impact of exposure of adding this swap to different rate types? And the only difference between the two swaps is the maturity of swap. Therefore, the MTM value of the swap will be highly correlated. There will be low probability that MTM will have opposite sign. The netting benefit will be minimal and netting factor will be close to 100%. And whereas a 4-year interest rate swap receiver is added to a 5-year swap pair position option here. Although the maturities don't match, but the two positions should exhibit a strong negative correlation. Typical netting factor should be close to 20% for reverse. However, MTM value could diverge over time. So there are netting exposure which could be defined, but if things are moving in opposite direction, then netting factor are more useful. We now move to the next part, that's marginal expected exposure. So marginal expected exposure are being affected by the correlation on the total exposure. Suppose a set of N trade has a single netting agreement. The total exposure for the netting is a linear combination of marginal expected exposure for each of the trades. If no benefits in netting, then marginal expected exposure equals the individual expected exposure. If netting benefits are present, then this will reduce the expected exposure total. So that's the marginal total exposure, and you have some numerical there. So that was it. Just to conclude, the total expected exposure will be very small at low correlation, and where netting benefits are large and will increases as correlation increases. So considering two trades have high correlation, the marginal E will positive and relatively equal. Conversely, which trades are negative because the riskier trade will have higher positive E and magnitude of E will be negative. Thus, correlation plays an important role in determining the total marginal exposure. The correlation of one trade to other trade in netting C set influences in the marginal E. Therefore, a trade with negative correlation in one netting may not have a negative correlation in different set of trades. So the whole idea here for this is to understand how things would evolve over time, and how to use different models in Monte Carlo simulation, or how to select some of those things. So that was it from my end. I hope this was useful, and I'll catch you in the next session. Bye bye.